the cooling water system. The first thing what we always check if we get into the machine house or the container where the CHP is operating, that we check and inspect visual, or if there is any leakage, damage, cracks, this always must be checked continuously if we get into the room. For sure as well, in the winter time we have to measure the antifreeze conditions of the cooling water, so that is protect for minus degrees. The target for Schnell shows up minus 27 degrees, so especially in winter time, check that, and if possible, and we can analyze the water, collect a sample of the cooling water from primary and secondary cycle, and analyze the quality of the water so that we ensure that nothing happens in the cooling system. Okay, let's go to the next points. Now we're talking about charge air cooler system. Yeah, charge air cooler system, again, as well as usual, visual inspection of leakage, damages, any cracks or whatever you can find on the charger system. If we have any leakage, we can get the problem that our charger pressure drops because of a leakage of the charger in the machine room, and this can cause further problems on the engine if the charger pressure drops, or as well we can get methane, so explosive gas into the machine room or container, so that should be checked all the time. Usually say every 3,600 operating hour to check the air filter, and for sure visual checks. The air filter is very important to, I always recommend to check the air filter. We can clean the air filter and we can reuse it, and to save a little bit of money on cost, on the operation costs. But it must be clear that if you clean the air filter, that you not get any dirt inside of the air filter, where later on the air gets sucked into the engine. The air filter is very important because if the air filter is blocked, we will not get enough oxygen into the engine for a proper combustion in the engine of the biogas. If we have not enough oxygen inside, we can have bad combustion, knocking, which as well can force damages or damaging inside of the engine, on the piston, cylinder head valves, and some other parts. So air filter, oxygen inside is very, very important. Schnell recommend to clean the turbocharger every 7,200 operating hours. I'm busy translating the document of Schnell how to clean turbocharger, but actually it's not really difficult. But I recommend to check and open the turbocharger every 7,200 operating hours. So that means a little bit less than 1 year. So every 9-10 months on schedule, that we get rid of all dirt, and particular on the turbocharger. As well, always check visually if you can see any damaging on the fins of the wheel, or any scratches on the housing, which will indicate that something with the shaft is wrong, that the turbo shaft and the wheel is vibrating or not running smoothly and touch the housing. So that's indicator. We have to check both sides of the turbocharger. We have the gas side and we have the gas charger side, and we have the exhaust gas side. Always check the shaft if you can feel a bigger gaps or that the bearing is not working nicely anymore. You will find more details in the Scania DC12 manual. I'll show you later on that. And so important as well, turn the shaft or the wheels that is running nicely and not connecting to any part of the housing. So, replacing turbocharger on maintenance schedule is every 14,400 operating hours. It could happen that the turbocharger can get damages out of the situation that we're not cleaning the turbocharger, that we have bad oil quality through sulfur content. The turbocharger get oil from the engine as well. That means if there's a high sulfur content or the quality of the engine oil is bad, we get impact on the oil what gets supplied to the turbocharger, which as well on the shaft with the bearing. So that means we could damage the bearing, get problems on the shaft, vibrations, and the turbocharger then can get damaged earlier. So that means if we always have a look on the turbocharger and ensure that we clean it properly, ensure that we have the right quality of engine oil, a low sulfur content, H2S content, we can reduce operating cost and maybe replacement of the turbocharger as well. I have, in my experience, we have turbocharger running with operation hour, sometimes operation hour with 20,000 operation hour. So the schedule say we should replace every 14,400 operation hour. But if the turbocharger is still fine, we don't have to. But in case that we get problems already at, for example, 10,000, or we realize at 7,200 when we check the turbocharger that there is already scratches on the housing, damaging on the wheels, then we have to analyze why and where it is coming from, that we ensure that we not get soon damage on a complete turbocharger. I'll have to go quickly back again. Sometimes if you have on the CHP a very high moisture content in the gas or in the air what the engine gets through the air filter into the turbocharger, and we're starting to get high moisture content, and the high moisture content get condensated. That means we have small drops of water which could run through the turbocharger. If we get water drops, small condensated water in the turbocharger is running with a very high RPM speed. Depends on the CHP unit, but we're running a RPM speed between 90 and 120,000 RPMs. That means the speed is very high, and if you get small particular of water drops inside of the turbocharger, it will damage the wheel here. The wheels start to get eaten. So there are small pieces will break out of the fins here, and if the fins get damaged, immediately the charger pressure will drop, and the quality of charge air will drop, and that opens the cycle that further on we will get damages from the turbocharger into cooler into the engine, which at the end of the day can force a complete engine damage. So please keep an eye on that. But we always ensure that the turbocharger is working properly. It's one of the main parts of the CHP and one of a very expensive part as well to replace. So, okay, as we had it in all water system, we have to ensure that we measure anti-freezing conditions, that we have enough the proper coolant inside, that we have a target of minus 27 degrees, so that nothing gets frozen in winter time and damage the water cycle of the charge air cooler. And if possible, that we collect a water sample to analyze the water. Will help as well to know in advance if we have any problem on the water system or on the water quality, which can later on cause further damages. All these points, what I mentioned, is I always recommend take your time to go through all the points and measure all the points and analyze all the points, and very important, record all the points. If we know what is the status quo of all the different points, we can see in advance, is there any problems coming up in future, or will there soon some other parts damaged, or if we maybe have to check some other parts first, that we ensure that there is no second problem coming up after we fix the first problem. So please take your time and go through the list and focus on and watch and focus on all the points what I mentioned. It can save you a lot of time, money, travel time to get again there, cost for the client and yourself as well, and yeah, and reduce downtime, what is really important. Okay, now let's move to the engine. Next part is the engine. As all parts and all components of the CHP, always visual inspection, if you can see any leakage, any damaging and so on the engine, around the engine, on the bottom of the engine, if you can see any oil leakage, that any cracks exist from vibrations of the engine. So always check all the components around the engine, on the holders, to reduce advanced damages. So we're coming now to the second page of the maintenance schedule. We're still on the engine side, and we are focusing on the oil mist separator filter element. There are different types of CHP. They use oil mist separator. Another one is, that's why it's called here mushroom. It's like a filter, looks like a mushroom on the engine. Here we have the oil mist separator. So, as I mentioned earlier, we have here the oil mist separator in front of the 6R20B CHP. So we can open the cover on top and then remove the filter element. Here it's the filter element number 1 here. Remove the filter element and appraise it every 7,200 operating hour. Check here as well that all the pipe connectors are tight, no leakage, no cracks from vibrations, and so that we ensure that we not get any damage, or that we can see any problems in advance before it really get to a big problem. The next point on our checklist is the centrifugal filter. So the centrifugal filter actually should be cleaned every time when you do the oil change, so with the oil change interval. The centrifugal filter, we spoke already, is sitting on the back side of the engine. This is the whole housing where the oil filter is connected to the engine block. Important on the filter element, we have here the rotor. The rotor is the piece what sits in the housing. The rotor gets the full oil pressure of the engine, and over the nozzle the rotor starts to turn, and through the turning speed it separates the particle in the oil from the oil, so the particle stay inside of that wall, and actually it stick on the wall through the speed of the rotation, and that must be cleaned every oil change interval. So what we have to check as well, as I mentioned earlier, we have to check if there is any noise of the centrifugal filter when we stop the engine. Is there vibration? As well, what we always, if we take it out anyway and clean it and prepare it for the next one, I usually recommend to have a second one in place. So a second one is always cleaned, so we are much faster to finish the maintenance part. If we have a second one, we take the old one out, check quickly the shaft, what is inside of the housing, that the shaft and the bearing are fine, not damaged, no scratches, and then take the old filter out, put the new filter, the empty, the cleaned one, back in. We can close the housing. We have to ensure that all the O-rings and seals are not cracked and sit properly on the area to seal the whole thing, and we can replace the filter within 5 minutes if we have a second one, and we don't have to wait until we had cleaned the other one to get the maintenance quickly done. So checking always the rotator that is run smoothly on the shaft. We have to check the bearing. The bearing is in the rotator, is on top and on the bottom here, and here is the bearing. This bearing can get damaged from sulfur content as well. So check the bearing of scratches, or if the metal is something like heated or with small spots. We could use, or we could lose oil pressure if the bearing is not working well. And as well, the shaft. The shaft is sitting here inside. It's the shaft here, sitting in the housing. There must be checked as well that there is no damaging on the shaft where the rotor is running. Yeah. Every 6,600 operating hour, we have to replace all the fuel filter. Fuel filter on the diesel system, so on the pilot fuel system. So we have here, we have here, after the refilling pump of the fuel pump unit, we have two filter elements, 10 mu and 3 mu filter. These two filters must be replaced. Check inside of the housing as well, or if there is any other dirt or stuff what you can clean out. As well, keep an eye on the housing if you remove it. If there is any small water bubbles, that will indicate us that there is a water in the diesel tank or in the diesel supply system, which could force damaging on the common high pressure pump or on the injectors as well. Check as well always the diesel filter if you can find any small dirt or metal particle or water drops. From the fuel pump unit here on the other side, here we're coming up, go through the high pressure pump and then through the filter system here. So another 2 filters what must be replaced every 3,600 operating hours. Okay, now we're going into the next step, replacing coupling at 10,800 operating hour. So the coupling is the coupling between the engine and the alternator or generator. This is a rubber coupling. The rubber coupling, if on one side is the rubber, is mounted on the shaft of the alternator and then get moved into an aluminium ring with exactly the other opposite profile, like the rubber here, at the engine. So that means that both are connected through this coupling. That means the rubber coupling absorb vibration between engine and alternator and help that way that no vibration can go from the engine to the alternator or other way around, or less vibrations. So they can absorb the vibration through the rubber. In case of the coupling get damaged, so the coupling is a rubber. So the coupling rubber can get damaged through high temperature in the machine house or in the machine room or in the container. Can get damaged over time or through vibrations. You can see it on the rubber. I don't have a picture actually. Usual Schnell, we have to replace every 10,800 operating hour. In my experience is that the coupling actually survives much longer, but depends on the condition, temperature, vibrations, and so on. Actually, you can see onto the coupling, onto the rubber, if you look from the side or from the top of the alternator onto the shaft, you can see the rubber coupling. And if the rubber start to get cracks, you can see if they start to get cracks here in the rubber, then it will be time to replace. But if you don't see anything, I will recommend to save cost and operating costs. I will keep the coupling until we can see the cracks. So, but then we have to monitor a little bit more to ensure that the coupling not get broken. In case that the coupling get broken, follow will happen. The coupling will usually break somewhere here on the rubber. That means the rubber outside will stay at the engine and the inside here, what is connected to the shaft of the alternator, will start to turn rubber in rubber. It immediately will indicate if the engine, for example, goes on overspeed because the alternator and the engine is not connected properly anymore because the coupling is broken. That means the alternator and the coupling and the alternator and the engine can slip. So the rubber will slip over each other and then you get overspeed of the engine and the engine will stop if the rubber gets broken, and you will smell it. The rubber, if it turns through or slips through, you can smell the burnt rubber. If you then have an error of overspeed and the engine is on standby or on error, you will smell the rubber. If you don't smell the rubber, if you start the engine again, the engine will turn on 1500 RPM because from the injection, but the alternator will not turn the same speed. They will not get up to the 50 Hertz. So then we will recognize again the smell, and the next thing where we will recognize is that the frequency of the alternator will be not rising with the same onto the same target than the engine. The engine, if the engine is operating on 1500 RPM, the alternator must run on 50 Hertz. So if the alternator is lower, shows up that the alternator speed is lower than the engine speed, that means the coupling is not working or it's slipped through. So these are some indicators on the coupling. I have a whole document about coupling and how to replace the coupling in our folder sheet. Okay, the next point.